everybody, good morning and welcome back to Reaper Pro Tips with me, your host, Anne, Disembodied Anne's Quindy, Disembodied Beard John, and Kiki sulking in the hall because I closed the blinds on the windows so she couldn't pound the glass and scare the birds. She's just like a cat. You're just like a cat, aren't you, Kiki? I know, right? So apparently the secret in our neighborhood is if you're on... Because we're on the main street, which is a busier street. Apparently, none of the parents want their kids to go on this street. And whereas the street, like, if you go down the main street half a block from us and turn right, there's a side street that goes down. And when I drove down there last night on my way to CrossFit, it was just glutted with trick-or-treaters, like crap tons. But that's like the block, that street has like block parties and crap. Like, it's obvious that like there's tons of kids and like all that kind of thing. And so apparently they don't ever think to just turn the freaking corner. We got a few, but we only went through one bag of, one bag of peanut butter cups and a little bit more. And then three-quarters of a bag of Snickers. Next year I'm just going to buy peanut butter cups. And I'm going to just do one bag and that's it. You're done. But, hey there, Keekers. What are you doing? Are you being a good girl or a bad girl? Or an indifferent girl? Baba, what are you doing? She is full of it today, you guys. Full of it. Yeah, you're acting like a puppy again. You're not a puppy. You're not a puppy. You're so much older than that. So silly. Oh my gosh. Oh, it was fine here. It was like maybe 50, right? 55. So we're going to do cutting Cynthia off the base today. I was looking for a base. I was figured out if I'm doing basing, I may as well work on Ed and his skeleton friends too. But I couldn't find a small cavalry base. So I was like, maybe I won't work on Ed. Although, maybe I'll pop Ed off his base and see if he'll fit on one of these other ones. There. Yeah, the problem here, I'm going to have to cut the base. Like, the problem here is that this is so long that's why I need a cavalry base. But the only cavalry base I have is big. And that's not going to work. So I'm going to have to figure something out. We might actually end up doing styrene or something funky. Something funky. I don't know. There we go. Because it's a metal model, so it has to have a base, in my opinion. Otherwise, it's just going to rub off. But the only cavalry base I have is monstrous. Way too wide. I'm not looking to make an army of skeleton diorama. I really don't want to. So the only cavalry base I have, which is these oval ones, by the way, is these big ones. So maybe I will look at Reaper's site and see about finding a smaller cavalry base, because I'm certain there is one. Like, something, this is actually a Games Workshop one from old times. Old-timey Games Workshop. No, he has fewer plastic bases than me, Crowley, because he does almost all busts. And he does busts or he does Games Workshop. So he doesn't have, that's like, those are the two things that he does. He used to do more like 75s, but not in a long time. Morning, Gambit. Karaniko, that's too much effort. When I'm on Pro Tips, guys, I'm like, not like, for one thing, I want to use Reaper bases. And we're not doing printing right now, so like, because it's getting pretty cold, and like, if I do one more weekend of printing, it's got to be after this weekend. I'm in Denver. I can't do anything this weekend. But I just, it's a waste of resin. It's just, in my opinion, except for busts or something where you need a specialized base, I really feel like it's a waste of resin to 3D print bases. For me. I'm always going to get like a better result, like just using an existing base where there are tons of sizes. But yeah, I'm sure Reaper's got a smaller cavalry base. I just didn't think I was going to need one because I thought I had one. So that's not going to work. Oh, well. That's annoying. So we'll have to see what we can do. Really wanted, yeah, but there's a limit. Yeah, exactly. Resin that could be used for cool things like dragons and dragon busts. Hold on. I have to... My father is sending my brother and I traumatic pictures. My dad is infamous for taking the scenic route on vacations. So Pete and I will never forget, like, in Arizona in Monument Valley, he decided to take a scenic route. And he drove us over the most rickety, like, single lane, ancient wooden bridge ever. That we're both, like, convinced, we're kids, right? We're just convinced that the bottom is going to drop out of this thing and plummet. 74065 60s. That's too. I think that's too big, but no, maybe it's not. No, Crowley, I think you've got it. Let me write that down though. Hold on. I'll put it in an order after. Make sure we've got it. Thank you, Crowley. 74065 60 by 35 mil. Grab my millimeter ruler thing. So 60 is about, yeah, 60 is perfect. 35 is a bit wide, but it'll work. But 60 is long enough, so. Yeah, I'll have to compare that to the G-dubs, because I think the G-dubs is bigger. Hold on. Yeah, the G-dubs is almost 80 millimeters wide. So, yeah. Sounds like that one is the best. Sounds like that one is the one I need, Crowley. Thank you for looking that up for me. Yeah. But yes, so my father, I was saying, is currently redriving that route with my poor mother. And he was just saying, he's like, I'm going to go to find the bridge, yada, yada. And we're all, Pete and I are like, oh my God, really? Like, for serious? And I'm like, I remember that bridge. And Pete's like, yeah, you tend to remember near-death incidents. My brother is awesome. Oh, Lordy. But yeah, and I have to leave my phone on also because we're still trying to get that roofer. I don't even want to tell you the rigmarole yesterday. I'm still trying to keep in a good mood. Okay, good. 1 second. I am like, we're trying to organize this roofer thing. David is also texting me. And I have to catch that phone call if it comes. But yeah, so my phone is going to make noises today because I have to catch the roofer call. Because it's like, yeah. Yeah, Quindy, it's like that. Let's just say that today, instead of attempting to get this guy on the phone, I just texted him. I'm just like, here's my info. And he didn't even read my whole text because he's like, give me your address. And I'm like thinking, I just typed it to you above. You obviously only read the first part of my text. Like, how rude, right? How rude. First of all, you didn't call me back. Second of all, you didn't even bother to read the whole text where I give you the information you just asked for. Yeah, this guy. Oh, Kerniko, that's funny. Ugh, yeah. Yeah, this is just, I get the feeling like, and maybe it's just me making excuses for this guy, but I get the feeling that in the 8 years between when he did our roof and now, his company has gotten a lot bigger. And so he essentially, like, he doesn't want to ghost our warranty, but it's also like harrying to him to have to deal with our tiny job in the middle of the big job that he's currently on. So I get the feeling it's like that. But he also just strikes me as not a very organized... He's either not prioritizing us, which would be rude, or he's not a very well-organized person. So yeah. So yeah, so I have to leave my phone on to wait for that. His son is supposed to call me today, and they're supposed to get here. Like they're supposed to come tomorrow if the son calls today. So that's why I had the phone on. All right, so that's the way it is, and now we will try to do something about this. Okay, got a couple of base sizes we can look at as usual. Usually when I want to do a more decorative scenic type of thing, I'm going to be aiming for this one, which is Reaper 74048, which is a very nice size for the scaled up, Reaper tend to be closer to 30, 32 mil these days. But yeah, or we could try to use the small one, which has the nice curved rim, which is a little bit nicer for a display model. I'm going to pop Cynthia off of her base. To put her on this one would be the better one because honestly, I don't want to do a lot of scenic. Like usually I use this one if I'm trying to do some kind of story. You can see all the space that's left on it. So this one is not really ideal. But this guy... All right. Pardon me while I put away some of the bases I thought might fit Ed, but don't. There. But this guy, as you can see, is too small for the current base. So we're going to cut down the current base. It's otherwise ideal. We're going to cut down the current base, and we might completely cut it off, if I can, just to make her more flat on the ground. And then we're going to milliput, because I got milliput. Let's use some milliput. Superfine white. And since I have never used milliput, because the milliput that my game store had when I was, starting out in the hobby was really inferior. Much more coarse. People used it for building, like, basing on bigger stuff, and they wanted the texture. Let's go grab some sculpting tools, too. I'm expecting it to be a lot like Abe's. My brain is all over the place today because I'm dealing with all this crap. And it's the first day of National Novel Writing Month. And I have to pack for a trip tomorrow. It's just one of those days. Oh no! And I left my clippers in the other room and I definitely need my clippers. 1 second. Clippers acquisition run. Beginning. It's getting cold here. It's like the season where I need to like dig up my stockpiles of Carmex and Blistex. Yep, it's NaNoWriMo time. Yes, indeedy. Hello, green users. We finished our paint job. And now we have to do basing. Oh, and I also need to fix focus because I can see the focus wobbling. Wobble focus. There, we're better. All right. So we got to cut off a lot of this space. And if we make it an irregular cut, we can sculpt some interesting kind of like rock texture and make her up a little higher, or we can cut her completely off. We start with small cuts. Kiki, that's enough. She is just like crazy lately. Kiki, that's enough. Come on, there's nobody there. She's like reacting to stuff that's like out on the street, you know? I'm just like, not appropriate. Not appropriate. So we're going to cut a couple of a V shape here, essentially. We got that one here, and then we're going to cut this one. And we're far enough away from the feet to not have to worry. Also, this entire model is really strong. It doesn't have any thin places where it's connected to the base. It's always backed by the cloth or the pumpkins. So it's really, really... Yeah. Dungeon 23 is the DM's version of Nano. It seemed fun, but like since I'm not running a game. it's not really where I'm at the moment. And I need to get North of the Wind well underway, of course. Yeah, dug out all my notes. Hi, Keekers. Hi, Keekers. Yesterday, I had to do a whole bunch of dog crap to get ready for nationals. Yeah, all my, like, I know it's going to get easier after this, but right now the dog crap is, and the Nano, and the everything, and the roofer, and the Kiki. And the Kiki, do you want to come up and see the stream? Or are you just here for scritches? Are you just here for scritches? I think you're just here for scritches. Yeah, hi. Hi, Scritcher girl. Okay. I'm going to keep going then. Yeah, if you're just here for scritches. Hey, play testing, yeah. Oh, you got to run it at ReaperCon. Nice. Ah. Taught yourself to knit socks. That's something I want to be brave enough to do someday, Tristadoma. All right, so we're going to cut more into this now. And we're going to fling a piece of plastic in the direction, not in Kiki's direction, in the direction of the wall. So we've got that. And we can continue. If we're going to do this, if we're going to use this as the basis of sculpting a kind of a ragged edge of stone or fallen earth around the edge here, we want to continue making cuts. We don't want to leave very much. And we want to make a raggedy edge that's going to be more interesting. Kiki, that's enough. It might be useful as a self-exploration exercise, Shadow Raven. Giving names to all of your psyche critters. Understanding where they're all coming from. How they're helping you. And how they're undermining you. But that is definitely not for the faint of heart as far as self-exploration goes. I'm going to write a novel featuring all of my inner psyche characters. And we're going to finally figure this crap out. Yeah, that sounds like an advanced exercise to me. You here because you're our comrade, Shadow Raven. There. Oh, see, and that actually was a fault in the plastic. See that shear? So I did not, as you can see, I did not cut that, but there was a shear there. So that's all right. That actually makes our base smaller. I'm cutting it down a lot now. She will fit, but I'm going to continue cutting because right now she could fit even a little better, I think. Although the pumpkin does overhang a bit, so maybe not. If the pumpkin didn't overhang like that, then maybe I'd keep cutting. But, aw. Oh, wow. The fox wanted candy. Nice, Zechariah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Carly, you guys in your meetings. Well, says the self-employed woman. All right, I'm going to cut a little bit more here. Just a little. On the back here. Again, everything is really filling the base, so I might just do a couple of notches just to give me something to work from as far as making this side more irregular. Interesting. Testodoma. $42, huh? That seems big. Like, I thought you were supposed to do socks with smaller needles, but maybe not. I know nothing about socks, so I will write down that Turkish cast on. Is that like something from Turkish crochet? Or Tunisian? Alrighty. As I'm chunking stuff out of the space, really I'm just giving myself something irregular so I'm not tempted to just make something smooth. Though I would argue that many writers, since most of us are pulling kind of directly from our subconscious while we write, I would argue that many writers are doing exactly what you're talking about, Shadow Raven. It's just that we have more layers of unreality in between our. I forget what Amanda Palmer calls this, but she definitely notices it, like with Neil Gaiman, who is now, I think they're separated now, but they're her ex husband, where she's like she calls it blender settings, or Neil does, where if your blender setting is low, then you're really you in your writing. Like, you know, people can tell that it's you, and you're like really straightforward and that you're not disguising anything. Whereas if your blender setting is like 10, then nobody can tell. Like, you're just writing a story and nobody can tell that anything in it is coming out of your subconscious mind. Which I always thought is kind of true with writers. Some people, it's very obvious that they're working from their own gremlins. I'm going to use a knife and make this a little rougher too. Ah, oh no. There. I just want something that's not smooth to work off of with my milliput. Yeah, the heel turn is always the problem. That's funny, Gurniko. The foxes were people watching. That sounds totally like foxes. Alright, I think we're good. So now we've got the base sized down with a chunky edge so we can glue it on, which again, I have to go in the other room for. Man, I'm like half a brain today, guys. Yeah, most of us don't like the parts of ourselves that we consider bad, right, Shadow Raven? That's totally common, myself included. The self-helpery I'm working with right now is really difficult for precisely the reason that it makes you kind of accept those parts of yourself. Like, it tries to work you through that. So that you can get over the crap. Yeah, that took off, actually, the shear in the plastic actually took off the lower part of the toe of the boot. So I'll probably have to, I'll be putting gravel on here, so it'll likely hide it, but you can see that it actually did take off part of the toe, but just like the lower under part. Hey, Jabrock. And 41 month resub, thank you so much. All right. So we're going to use our globby glue. Fresh globby glue that I just opened to get this situated. Then we're going to do some sculpting. And usually you want to, when you're situating on a base, I actually don't go dead center. I actually go a little bit back so the model has a little bit more in front of them. And that's just something taken from painting and photography, where the going wisdom is that you should always leave the figure or the animal with more in front of them than behind. It makes the figure feel less cramped and more open. It feels more correct than actually centering it. Oh, yeah. Yeah, Crowley. you could totally do that. Like worm things are always useful, right? But yeah. Okay, so while we set that up, I'm going to mix up our milliput. And there's a little bit of globby glue coming out. That's all right. It's gel. It's a gel super glue, so I'm not so concerned with it. I'm going to actually put this up here and press it into the sticky tack and just have it sit where you guys can see it while I'm mixing up my goo. All right. Yeah. That do be the problem. Maybe you just do 4 because they're babies, Carly. Like, you could do some really thin snakes that way. And probably if you did that, you could, if you do the really thin snakes, make them kind of curvy and wobbly, and then just let them cure, and then cut them into the pieces for the tentacles. And if you've made them wiggly and wobbly enough, you should be able to, like, pose them okay, just by turning them in one direction or another, even though they're cured. So, like, turning the whole thing. Yeah. Like, I wouldn't try to actually pose little, unless you're going to use little wires or something for it. You could, technically, you could use, like, wire and dip it in something. But yeah, I probably would just use green stuff. Make it really wiggly so that I could cut off little sections that are going to already be pre-curved and then situate the curve to make it look better. And then you can always cap them off with a little bit of green stuff if you want to. No, you don't need to do that. Nope. Yeah. Yep. I mean, if you want them to be a little bit more resilient, then I probably would put a really fine wire underlying them. But yeah, no problem. All right, so your milliput comes in 2 tubes. One of them with blue paper and the other with white. They are 2-part epoxy, just like every other sculpting putty on the market. And I need to cut these off. They have tape. I like to actually get the tape off. And I'm dropping things over because I'm like, didn't sleep great last night. I carved a little bit too much and it affected my sleep. I've decided officially I'm going back on almost keto once I'm back from Colorado. I'm just not feeling real well on carbs lately. Nice. Yeah, the Kickstarter looked like it was doing well. I haven't checked it since yesterday. Alright, so this is all wrapped up in a very long... It's definitely goopy, like it's sticky. Interesting. Like sticky even through that plastic layer. Alright, this is a bag? Yes, it is a bag. Alright, that's what I needed to know. Yeah, like it's goopy in here. This is just mildly concerning. I'm definitely washing my hands after using this stuff. Not having worked with milliput before, I did not know it was going to be totally goopy. No. I have no preference for milliput whatsoever, Jabberwock, but because I had never used the superfine version, or indeed I never used any version because I didn't like the ones that weren't fine. I have never used milliput. This is my first time using milliput, and we're doing it on stream because why not? So far, though, I'm very unimpressed with the packaging. The fact that it is tacky right through the plastic, and now my fingers are all goopy and feel chemically is not a plus for me. I decided to go with this over Epoxy Sculpt because Epoxy Sculpt, in my opinion, goes bad too fast. All of my things of Epoxy Sculpt have died, so I had no Epoxy Sculpt. So this one is not goopy. The white one did not bleed through the bag, but the blue bag one totally left a residue even through the bag. So I'm not impressed. I assume that Milliput is going to be very much like Epoxy Sculpt. They have the same characteristics in that they will thin with water and things like that. Alright, well I have to work with this ooky goopy crap. We'll see if I like it better than Epoxy Sculpt when I get down to it. But I'm curious to see how it compares to Aves. So the secondary one is kind of off-colored on the outside. I'm just going to get a bunch of it. We're going to grab a pinch. I'm going to put this sucker in my freezer for sure after this. The challenge is not getting the goopiness all outside of the plastic. I discovered that, yeah, I mean, most putties will kind of die over time, Red Lynx, but I was not pleased with how fast my Aves did last time I had some Aves, which was several years ago. Yeah, I mean, that's usual with epoxies, Hyper, for sure, but I don't like how it bled through the actual bag. Oh, bye, Crowley. But yeah, most putties will die over time. You can extend life by putting them in the freezer. But the Epoxy Sculpt just really, like, it just stopped working. And I was trying to convert a Mordheim character. And it just, like, never set. And I talked to some people, and they're like, yep, it'll do that over if it sits for a while, you know. I'm like, all right. So I went back to green and got better with green instead. But, you know, sometimes water smoothing putties are something that you think, oh, maybe. So I thought, well, why not? It was on sale. So I've got 2 equal globs, more or less. See, and this is super fine. I have no interest in anything but the super fine. Yeah. More brittle. Yeah. It feels a lot like Aves, maybe a little more doughy. It's not as, like, I think Aves is more like a gluten flour. And look at the residue. Yuck. Don't use this, Kornika. It'll eat you. It seems more brittle than Aves now, too. Like, Aves I can get isn't quite as breaky as this. Like, when I pull it, I can see it shred. It's also going to be very hard to tell when it's fully mixed, so I just have to kind of keep going. Feels a little bit better now. A little less raggedy, still pretty raggedy though. Yeah, I've got no, because if I'm going to use this, it's going to be for things like smoothing over gaps and, you know, sculpting. And I always want to add my own texture to bases. I don't really want a pre-texture. So I've got no interest in the Milliput that's not super fine. Alrighty. I think I'm going to assume that this is pretty okay, just from the feel of it. You're scared to even touch the screen. Yeah, yeah. Well, you'd always, even if you did use it for that, you would need to do an armature underneath the Hyper, I would think. That's just good practice, in my opinion. I need to get some of this crap off my fingers, or I'm going to go crazy. Pardon me while I try to rinse off a little bit of this. Because water soluble, right? It should come off. All right, there we go. Excellent. But yeah, I mean, when you're using sculpting putties, if you're going to do any sort of protrusion and you want it to be protected, you do need to do an armature of some sort. But here I'm just sculpting over the top of the detail we already have, so I'm not very concerned about that. All right. Get the crap I want. I'm going to use a big spoon as usual for pressing it down. Right, that's why we're using this as a skin. But I thought I would try it on screen just for you guys. Yeah. Yep. All right. So first thing, do need lubricant. Sticks to sculpting tool. But yeah, go ahead and, I mean, it's cool you're telling us all this stuff, Hyper, but I'm very into like kind of exploring it for myself right now too. So don't spoiler everything. Because part of this experience is just me trying to figure out how it works just for my own. I like to do this, like, I don't always read up on stuff like this before I do it. I just like to have my own opinion of it without other people. So it's good to know about the durability, though. All right. Water. Grab. Come on, you. Get in there. All right. So water on the tool. Obviously, water on the tool means it's also going to start being, it's going to thin it down. But it appears to be the way to make it work here, to not stick to the tool. And unlike with green stuff, when you get the water on the tool with this, it is going to start kind of melting. It's going to give you a different effect. I'm kind of sad that it's white. I had hoped to find a gray, but I didn't see one online when I was looking. Let me get a tissue. Nope, the yellow is sticky note. I just use sticky note. I would never use double-sided tape. There's no point. I mean, I guess you could. The model won't stick down to it quite as well. I just use super glue over sticky note. Sticky notes are super fast. You could also just use any masking tape. So this is not too bad. Just going to edge it in around the feet. Make it pretty flat. There wasn't much texture to start with on the base, so we're not working against any of that. Sorry I didn't cover the sticky note because I thought I'd covered it enough times before Sir Gambit, but I keep forgetting there are some new people. I just put down a sticky note, use a knife to cut around it, and just leave it sticking there, and that is enough to keep any super glue from coming through on the underside. It's super fast, it's super cheap, it's super easy, and that's why I do it. Also, I kind of have a sticky note affectation in case you hadn't noticed. So essentially I'm loading up my sculpting tool with water before I grab the little bit of putty. And then I'm pressing it down. The nice thing about this that I can see what I would maybe use this for. So you kind of see how it's kind of flattening and flaking out like this. This would be a great tool to use for doing like shale, doing like those long, like flaky rocks. This would be a really, really good for that. Because this is definitely wanting to kind of like flatten and fracture like that kind of stone. So I think that, and given its brittleness, you probably could do sheets of it and then break it to get that kind of effect. You'd probably have to sculpt onto plastic to do that so it would pop off nicely. But that would be that's a really useful application because other putties are often too flexible to give you that kind of effect. So if you're looking for a flat, like shale kind of slate kind of like doing slates for a roof on terrain might be easy with this. If you wanted to be that hardcore. I do like that. That's unusual, and I haven't seen it in another putty that I've used. It has this kind of like thing it wants to do. And whenever you see that a putty has a tendency in a direction, ask yourself if it is useful direction for you. What could I use this for? But it's definitely giving a different effect. I'm not needing to work it as much, and I'm also like kind of not wanting to work it as much because it's very fragile. It wants to slide under my tool. Wants to slide and fragment. Aves is more plasticky and holds together better, which is why Aves is going to be also why Aves is going to be less brittle. So this is just like paint, where the more plasticky it feels and the more rubbery it feels, the more flexible it is. Proctor does exactly what I just said. Well, there we go. See? Great minds. Yeah, I can see why, because that's and when you use a material, like I said, this is why it's worth getting new materials, assuming they're not super expensive. And I'm using the same thing, guys. I'm using plastic to put my mixed putty on so that I can work with it, grab little pieces of it off. I'm pretty much breaking off a piece and then dipping my tool in water and then plastering it on. But yeah, ask yourself when a putty or something like this is working in a way that you haven't seen before, ask yourself, what is this good for? What could I use this for? There's almost always an application. Sometimes no, but come on, you little putty beast. Okay, I'm gonna plop that one there. Sedimentary rocks I've got down. I can sculpt those. I really enjoy sculpting those. But that's good to know, Kerniko, that there's a product out there. So since I've got a glob here, I'm just going to leave it a glob. I'm going to kind of work it here and make it a separate rock. It is very fragile. Like, it doesn't have a lot of... It's not going to spring back. It's absolutely going to sculpt exactly like clay. But less resilience, less springiness, and definitely takes a very flat edge, flat fine edge, easily. So here I'm going to get the putty around the toe of that boot that got taken off. And I'm leaving some holes and things because once I get going here, once this is cured, I can utilize this just as more texture. Yeah, except cottage cheese is springier. I know, because I love cottage cheese. It's like, it's cottage cheese if when you added water to it, it just started melting like ice cream. Edging it in. But yeah, it's a very different effect than when we do bases with green stuff, that's for sure. I'm using just a Kleenex with my fingernail pressed on it just to clean off that edge a little bit. Don't want to have to scrape putty off of it any more than I have to. Yep, that's exactly it. That's what I was talking about, plastic wrap, Twisted Oma. If you wanted to do that, you'd put it down on plastic. Cottage cheese diet. Oof. It's amazing that you stuck with it for 3 months. Those kind of diets, I'm like, no thanks. I'll stick with my keto. Young and stupid, yep. Oh, bye, Zachariah. Nice to have you pop in. Sorry, my brain is fatigued today. I'm not as on it as I was yesterday or the day before. Yeah, sadly, overexposing is definitely a thing with this. I'm thinking I want to put some of this in frame. So maybe there, make it a little easier to see what I'm doing. So I'm interested to see how long it takes this to set up, or to start setting up, and how it changes. But yeah, just like working with this right now, I can see that other putties would be my go-tos instead. For 28 mil for sure. And for that matter, probably for anything. Other putties are, I think, more versatile and responsive. But for gap filling, like smoothing, as far as like being able to turn this into water, that's very useful. I have some old metal models to work on at some point this coming year, and I'll probably try to use this milliput. So we'll go right up to under the cape. But yeah, this is one where it's also going to show every tool mark that you've got. It's really overexposing. There it is. So if you leave any obvious tool mark, it is going to show it. So it's less forgiving if you're using it as this kind of base filler, texture set upper. And that's kind of why, like, I never bothered with it, is like, it seemed like, you know, maybe ages ago, Milliput was the way to go because Milliput was the only game in town. But now we have so many other putties. That might be a little big. Yeah, we got so many other putties out there now that can do all sorts of things. That I think that, except for doing that particular rock type and maybe some gap filling. Although I always prefer green for gap filling because I can sculpt it better, and I would say that would hold up here. Like if you need a smooth fill, then this maybe. But I'm a little bit reluctant to even go there, honestly, guys, because of how this holds detail. It holds fine detail very well, but that's very, as I mentioned a second ago, it's very unforgiving. It means that anything you leave, any vestige of a tool mark or a fingerprint is going to be held. Like, it's going to stick. And I'm good enough at sculpting at this point that I feel like I can counter that, but many people would not be. No, Milliput is more like Abe's Epoxy Sculpt or any other epoxy putty, Agent Marble. Milliput is old school. It's been around for decades. Like I said, back in the day, it was really the game if you wanted to gap fill or sculpt big areas. But now we have other options. But this is a weird, like, I would say this is halfway between Abe's and a texture gel. Except it's not textured at all. Like I said, all the texture is just tool marks. Like the texture, the paste that I use, the flexible modeling paste, I think actually might be better than this in some ways. I don't know. This is a weird hybrid between those two things, between an actual sculpting putty and a texture gel, or a lack of texture, a flexible modeling gel. There we go. That's more like, I wasn't using a texture paste. This is not at all like the texture paste that I've used. This is more like the flexible modeling paste, which is really just goop. This has a tiny bit more backbone than goop. It's going to hold these shapes. Yeah, so normally it's green stuff or Milliput / Aves. Aves Epoxy Sculpt is kind of halfway between green stuff and this, I would say. Having a little bit more flexibility, but not the flexibility of green. Now is when I need to get away from the metal tool. So when we get a little bit too much on the metal tool, that's when it's time to bring in the clay shaper. Yeah, I guess it's something like grout. I don't know, I've never sculpted with grout. Too much water there. If I leave too much water on this, it's really gonna melt. So I need to bring in my Kleenex and slurp some of it off before it all gets absorbed into the putty. That will essentially ruin any attempt to sculpt with it. Yeah, the silicone tool is a little bit more forgiving here. But again, this is just like very much it's going to hold everything. So if you're going to put some sort of gravel or other texture on top of this, I would say cool. I'm not liking some of the texture that it's leaving as much as I enjoy green stuff. Coming back over here and smoothing in some of this. Most of those fad diets are not really meant for you to lose weight. They're just meant to get like attention and fame for the author of it, sadly. All right, blook. But sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between the real diets and the fad diets. Many people would call keto a fad diet and have, but I still lost 65 pounds on it. Now there are some times I can think of flooding with water being a good thing, which is like right here where I'm trying to make this piece of Milliput blend in, but I'll pull some of that fluid off. I mean, I have texture stamps. I could just use that Pendrake. But to be very honest, I enjoy sculpting. I enjoy working the rock shapes. And the point of this experiment isn't to really just grab a texture penny or a texture stamp and zap some texture into this. The point is to actually learn, like work with the Milliput and understand what it's capable of and what it's good at and what it's not good at. And if I just rip out a texture stamp, I'm not going to get that experience. I would also be a little concerned, although let's see. I'd be a little concerned about using texture stamp with this. I think I would have to, I would say with this Milliput, I would let it set up before you put texture on it. If it's still goopy, it's going to just stick into your texture stamp. But I mean, I have these that Bob and Julie nicely contributed to my collection, Pendrake, so I don't think I really need a texture penny. I can texture with this, but I think if I put this in the bottom, yeah, it'll texture it like green. It didn't stick to that, so that's good. But I'm less, I'm just less in love with this effect and how it looks. Which is kind of why I held off getting Milliput for a long time, but I thought, you know what? I should actually work with it. And then I'll be able, if I work with something, then I'll be able to explain exactly what I enjoy or don't enjoy about it, what worked for me and what didn't work for me, instead of just saying, well, I've always heard X and Y about it, and that's not really the way I groove, right? Now I can say definitively regarding the superfine the things that I like and don't like. But I can see why Proctor would use it for slates. I think that's one of its only applications, in my opinion. I mean, as far as sculpting with it like this, I can certainly use it to get some nice rough rock forms, but I could do that with any putty, and honestly, I would be further along if I was using green stuff right now. But yeah, I mean, it's always worth, I always tell you guys this, but, and some people, maybe it's not, but I feel like it's always worth testing stuff for yourself. Because no matter what expert you're listening to, you are going to have a different experience. And you're going to do things a little bit different than that expert maybe. So you might find that something that they love doesn't work for you at all. And you may find that the thing that they think is annoying actually works with the way you do things. So that's why I decided to do this, is like, I feel like I always like to test it myself. Oh, too much. The nice thing is that if you get a bunch of Milliput on something, just throw some water on it and it goes away. Oh, Milliput is more cost effective. Absolutely, Polly. I feel like. Here, hold on. Hold on. That's a good question. I feel like I paid a lot less, though. Hold on. I can tell you how much I paid. Doop. Boop. $12.49, $2.97 an ounce. Versus green stuff, which currently in the big tube is $5.68 an ounce. So half the price. Versus Abe's Epoxy Sculpt. And if you ever wondered how to spell that, that's how you spell it. Getting a lot of that. Let's see, price. It's not giving me a... You can get like 8 ounces. That's a pound of Aves for $34.45. Which is about $2.15 per ounce if you buy it in the huge tubs. But like I said, I haven't been impressed with Abe's lifespan. So Abe's and Milliput, very similar in price. At least if you buy Abe's in the big one. But I wouldn't. Smoothing with green is something you have to learn, Hyper Bunny. It's totally doable. It's much harder to learn. Whereas with Aves, it's very forgiving. Or sorry, with Milliput, it's very forgiving. Or at least it's forgiving. I can imagine how it would be. It's not forgiving on the space. I have too little room. But if I were smoothing like some pits and a cape, then this would be very easy, right? But green does, green is harder to smooth for sure. However, I would be getting a better effect here. See, this is the thing. Yes, Milliputs would smooth down really easily if I was like filling in pits or I would say filling in pitting is one of its biggest thing. But I feel like I'm also limited. Like it has to be a very specific type of surface for me to be able to smooth with a finger to get this really, really smooth. I feel like I'm good enough with green now that actually green would be much easier with most surfaces. If it's anything more complex than a straight up convex surface where there's a pit, I feel like green is actually maybe better for me anyway. I didn't used to think that, but actually what changed my mind was working with Aves on an old pewter model, and Ed walked by and he's like, I'd use green for that. And I'm like, no, I wouldn't. And he's like, well, you just wait and see. And I felt like, because I had heat pitting on the legs of these models were 54 millimeters, and there was heat pitting on like the legs and the coat. And I felt like it would be easier to do a water-soluble putty like Aves, but I was really actually having trouble getting it perfectly smooth where I needed it. So I ended up actually cutting off a lot of that and going over with green, and green was easier. Once you learn to like how to smooth green, and the thing about green is that at least for like if you're like gap filling on something like a dragon, you can sculpt green so much easier. So like if you need to do a scale pattern to make it blend in with the dragon, you can do that with green. I would not want to do it with this stuff. Yeah, it's good for gap filling, not good for sculpting in my opinion. So it really depends on what you're doing. If you're filling gaps in like crevices, this would be fine because you wouldn't care about any texture that you leave behind in a deep crevice. But I can see how it's some of its best application might be to sculpt separate pieces and then break them off if you need something with a particular type of texture. It's really funny that I arrived at the same conclusion that Proctor demoed on his stream because I actually never saw that crow's nest. All right, so we're just essentially using this to create chunks of, and I lost my white in the screen, so it's hard for you guys to see this if I don't have the white. But I'm just like making some rough rock shapes here with my metal tool, and then I'll come back and smooth it a little bit. It is way less sticky at the outset, which, again, it's something you learn, right? Like, it actually stuck to my fingers a lot more than the green did. But green being sticky is also a plus, right? Because once you can get it on the model, it will stick very nicely and you don't have to worry about it. This is sticking okay too, though. Not having any problems with it sticking. So it's fully sticky enough. But I feel like it's just purpose driven, right? Like with any miniatures thing. So this is like I said, in some ways this is more forgiving. But in others, like holding artifacts like fingerprints or tool marks, it's not as forgiving. Green tends to relax. You can buff out like issues a little easier than this. This holding everything is both, it's a pro and a con. It depends on what you're doing. It's just that it's a different kind of tool. But I would say that green and this stuff are not interchangeable. I feel like they are very different products. And what I'm doing here with Milliput, I would say, is not the recommended use of this product. But I can see why, because it's cheap, is good for creating like slab basing, like just big chunks of rough, rocky, or textured area to put big models on. I think we'll just leave that there. We're good here. We got rough rocks back here. Yeah, I think we're okay. I think we're okay there. Now I'm just gonna try to smooth some stuff in. Yeah, you can do that with any of the other, like, you can do, okay, things you can mix with green stuff. Fimo or Sculpey will both mix with green, and the reaction, the heat of the reaction of the green stuff curing will cure the Sculpey. You can also mix green and Aves, which Jason Weeby did for a long time, I think. And that works really well. So since you can mix green and Aves, I'm not surprised that you can also mix green and Milliput. You can get kind of a hybrid that way, Hyper. Like, you'll get more workability, more the workability of clay, but you get more the flexibility and strength of green as well. So a hybrid putty mix is, I've heard many people use. All right, so let me get my clay shaper. We've got a pretty good rock texture going on here. I feel like I want to wipe out the little texture mark that I did up here. I didn't like it. Too deep. Too out of scale. So the nice thing here now is that I can take a little water on my sculpting tool and smooth it that way, right? And if you're adding water to it, it's not quite as, it's more melty. It's going to kind of melt together and you're not going to get that tool mark retention as much. But in the mixing putties together thing, I think, and Julie can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's you want to use more green than you do the added putty. So the nice thing about the Milliput is that you can get much sharper edges than you can with just pure green stuff, because it does retain tool marks so very well, and it doesn't flex. So you can create some very sharp rocks if you want to, like that one. And I imagine if should you sculpt cracks and things, like I kind of suggested one right here, this putty's going to retain that kind of thing a lot better. And it's going to be a little easier to do that too. It is staying malleable for a long time. And I can still add water and smooth it, even though it's much later in the stream. Yeah, just a little bit of whatever putty you're mixing with the green works best. That's what I thought. Thanks, Julie. I seem to recall you having told me that, but I wanted to... It's been a while. I've slept since then. Just going to polish with my sculpting tool and a bit of water the top here, just to smooth it out a little bit. If I want to put texture in it, I can use a stamp or I can use the tip of my sculpting tool. And then if I've gotten too much texture or I think it's too regular, I can, again, apply water, melt it down a little bit, put a little bit too much water on there. And then I'll melt it down, make it a little more subtle. But yeah, as far as making big bases, though, I do feel, I guess it depends. If I'm putting something over an underlying, like if I'm building up cork and I'm putting on a skin, I can see this working really well and being the cheapest option. Or the wood putty that David likes to use, but I don't remember how expensive that is, relatively speaking. It's also an inch tube like green stuff, so it's probably the same cost. So probably this stuff is still cheaper. But if I'm building a base up from scratch, I probably would use Sculpey or Super Sculpey instead to create bulky shapes, and then come in with a different putty depending on what those shapes are. This is a nice rock. This is a nice sharp-edged rock that we've got there. So that's nice. Milliput can do that. So if I need a much more forbidding rocky ground where the stones are very angled and you know, can retain that angularness, then this is the sharpness, then this is definitely the putty for that, I would say. So got that really sharp rock right there. Just messing around, seeing what I can do with this stuff, what it's good for. Then I'll know in the future when I want to use it. But yeah, being able to do those really sharp angles and have them hold is nice. Now back here I went a little softer with the earth. Although I do have angled clay shapers, I do tend to like working with the round one, the taper point. There we go. Hey, and we've managed to take up the whole stream. I didn't need Ed after all. But yeah, I imagine that if I worked with this over a very large base area, I would get a real feel for it. I'm getting there now. Just learning what I can do with it. Just going to brush with a little bit of water, just going to brush the tip of this clay shaper under here to blend that in underneath the cape. It's very cold. It does remind me of traditional clay. Been a long time since I worked with clay, like real clay. Just kind of looking at what I'm doing here and refining. The water has helped to smooth out the rough edges I didn't like. It'll probably, since I did let a lot of water leach into this, I feel like it's going to take a lot longer to cure because of that. Which means you could keep working it for a while. Which, you know, with green, you definitely have, like, that definite window, depending on temperature in your work zone. But with this, I feel like if you added water, you could elongate that workability if you wanted to. So we've got a little bit smoother stuff back here, but that's good. And we'll just essentially do kind of a rocky area here, and then we'll do some earth on the front, and we'll pop some plant life into that. This I feel still looks like putty and not a rock, so more work with it. Does anybody know if you could mix a little bit of, I feel like that with the fluid absorbency of this, that I could have actually mixed a little bit of paint into it to color it. Does anybody know if that works? Hyper, do you know? Like just mixing a little bit of pigment in? I feel like if I'd put a dab of walnut in here, it would work. But I'm not sure. I don't know that I would want to dye. It would get all over my fingers, Jabberwock. As I was mixing it. Artist ink being true dyes. Maybe I'll try it. Maybe we'll do it. I mean, the paint's going to get all over my fingers too, I guess. It doesn't really matter. The dye's just harder to get out. Yeah. You can do it with polymer clay. Yep. Because it would have been better to work with this on in a color where you guys could see it a little bit better. All right, I think this is going to work. I think I'm happy with my rocks. I got to try several different kinds of rocks. Maybe a little bit back here. Different shapes. Mess around with it until I felt like I understood where it was going. Any color. I would probably go with walnut because it's more black. If I wanted a gray, it would just be a warm gray. Hold on. We'll try it. We'll try it in just a second. There. Okay, let's put this aside, grab our putty, grab some walnut, and try it. Yeah, I just don't know. You know, you just never know. I don't know enough about epoxies in Ara to know if the presence of the paint resins would inhibit it or what would happen. Hey there, Miniature Sten. How's it going? We were working with Milliput. I was playing with Milliput for the first time today. Yes, in all my years, I have never effed around with Milliput. I'm not impressed, but I can see some applications. So now I'm going to actually put some paint in it, because why not? Okay, a little bit of paint. Where's my lid? I don't know. I'm just losing things today. Like my mind. Yeah, I feel like that too. It's just, you know, until you do it, it's going to get my fingers all messy. Oh well. Let's just get it in there. I also want to see how much the color is lost. Like, how much does that little dab of walnut actually work? Boop. I'm going to go back a little bit. So that walnut, originally it looked like it was going to be stronger. Now I'm just getting kind of a speckly effect. Not as smooth as I wish. But then that was kind of my experience mixing this stuff up in the first place, so. Yeah, so the answer is it did color it. You can see the difference, right? It's a very subtle color because I mean it's white milliput, so I assume that we've got something in there to keep it white. So, but it does make it just slightly gray. I'm gonna get this stuff off my fingers. So not terribly effective, but it works. I could have made it slightly gray if I wanted to. There's your, you can see the difference. That's good to know. I mean, I paint over my putties, so there's really not a lot of reason for me to use a colored putty underneath. But again, we are here to experiment. So the one thing, although the ink suggestion has merit for another reason now that we've done this. So dyes do penetrate a bit better usually. So using a dye would probably give us stronger color here if we wanted it. Using an acrylic artist's ink like De La Rowney would probably give us something in between those two things. It really is clay. I mean, it acts like it acts like clay. But I'm not sad about it. This base, like this will be okay. We can paint this. There's nothing protruding, so it's not going to break. And once we paint it, it'll probably look just like any base we did with any other epoxy. You'll be doing the best sculpt. Is this sculpting day? Is it just sculpting day today? So this is my last stream, guys, for the week. Just to remind you all, and then we'll hand it over to Luca. Because I who obviously also need sleep, I'm going to Denver tomorrow. So I will be back on Monday. I will be streaming on Monday. And then after that, I am in the house until, oh, you know, probably quite a while. I will be here. And then really very few things should interrupt. Yes, very few things should interrupt us. All right, so we'll let this lady sit, and when we come back, maybe we'll finish up her base real quick, and then we'll make a new rotation. I'd hate to just kind of leave her hanging, but she's turning out quite nice. It's a very, like I said, a very unconventional witch color, but she's still a witch, obviously. So, yep. Yeah, I will say hi to the puppers. Yes, I'm about to see a lot of puppers at this dog show. So yeah, thank you everybody. Thank you for tuning in. Sorry I'm a little bit sleepy today. And I hope you all have fun with Luca. And Luca, I hope you have an excellent stream. All right? Thanks everybody. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.